So thank you so much for joining. We're going to talk about meaningful leadership conversations driven by data and rooted in science. The topic itself or the title might not be that sexy, but the outcome is, I can promise that we have plenty of case studies. So in the true spirit of D&I need you to be absolutely evil. Because often the best way of saving something is by not ruining it. And I'm going to show you something else later on. But before that, I don't know if you had this look on your face ever when you were talking to someone and you thought, what is wrong with that person? They just don't get me. They have no common sense. What is wrong with them? Then probably we never think about the fact that they think about us the same way. But we always think that, oh, the other person is, something's wrong with them. I'm good. They're not. So how can I teach them common sense? Our topic is fantastic, but it depends on how we approach it. Because if you look at cultural and personal differences as clashes of common senses, then we can remove this illusion of superiority, that I'm better than you, I know the truth, and I have to teach you. No, life makes sense from the other side as well. Often we just don't know why, but that's exactly what we can find out today. Would you tell me two things about you, one or two of you? What are you the most proud of, and what is it that people tend to misunderstand about you? And you get this look. The most proud of and what people misunderstand about you. At least one person. Because the second half of the sentence could have saved me so much hassle in my life. Anyone? Share something about yourself.
It doesn't have to be one thing that I'm both proud of and people misunderstand about me, or two different things.
That's a weird combination. I mean, if you have that, it's fantastic.
That's why. No, because I
Two
found
separate questions.
Both, like in Polish context, I'm very proud that I'm cheerful, open, talkative. I easily talk to people, and it's very much misunderstood in our context because people generally don't easily talk to strangers, and you might be considered many things which are not really weird, all kinds of things, right? So I found one that goes for both. I'm actually proud of this, but it's very often misunderstood. So if that helps.
No, that's good, because often our strengths can be, the weaknesses when we overdo them or when they are perceived differently by other people. Because in my case, for example, when I think really hard, then I look angry. Short hair, big body, angry look, that's not good. So usually when I do a workshop, I tell people it's like a preemptive strike, because if the impact is negative, that's not good. So I'm still working on it. It's not an excuse, but just in case, if you think I'm angry, I'm just thinking. So let's do a quick quiz. And I burnout report, it's up by 50% if you look at the employees between 18 and 34, entry-level employees and senior management. Burnout rate is up by 50% compared to the previous year. It's getting worse. But employee engagement is plummeting as sharply as burnout rate is skyrocketing. So that's one thing, that something is not working, but it's getting worse. Because diversity without inclusion turns into painful liability. Inclusion is needed to unlock the potential and the benefits of diversity, which are not automatic. That's the invisible fuel that we need. There was a really interesting case study. It was 2004. In Thailand, there was a British family. They were spending their holiday, and their little girl said, something is wrong. I can see that the water is just strange. There's a square shape and it's foaming a bit. I think there's a tsunami coming. And they thought, come on, that's not true. Because she learned about this 2 weeks prior to the holiday. And there was a Japanese man who understood the conversation and said, yeah, actually, I heard that there was an earthquake somewhere close. So they evacuated the beach, and 100 people, more than 100 people survived. But in 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake killed 230,000 people. And that was the only place where everybody survived. Here, the key message is that all the signs are around us, that something is coming, something is not right. We can ignore the signs or we can act. So what I'm going to share today is all about this. So it's not meant to be dark. It's meant to be informative, data-driven, because meaningful conversations are also hard conversations, that we make progress, we learn about each other, and we can make better choices in the future. That would be the idea. And it is even more urgent because if you look at the demographics, this should be like a pyramid. Lots of young people and a few old ones. But it's not a pyramid anymore. If you look at Europe or United States, it's more like a Christmas tree. But if you look at China or Japan, that's even more urgent. This is predictable. This is the maximum of people, not the minimum. So it's getting more and more difficult to attract and engage talent within companies. People skills are getting much more important. That's why we need to do something about it. So this session is designed to offer not necessarily solutions. I mean, we have that, but different insights. I would like to present the same situation from different perspectives so we can make better decisions. So when it comes to measuring ROI of the sales training, that's easy. You make more sales, then it's working. But when it comes to D&I, how do you justify it? How can we quantify the tangible benefits and measure progress? How can we raise standards? So there's a two-pronged approach. One is focusing on how we can create exponential impact for our clients. But at the same time, as consultants and coaches, how can we build a scalable business and meaningful legacy? We shouldn't choose between them. We need both. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. So that's exactly what we do, ICQ Global. So the good-looking guy there, that's me. And I created two frameworks, Global Disc and Growth Zone. And both of them are ICF accredited. We won a lot of awards. We have more than 200 licensed partners in more than 50 countries. And the goal is to create meaningful conversations. It's very difficult to talk about something you are not aware of. And it's very difficult to optimize it. Not impossible, but highly unlikely. So it's not just a good idea. We have plenty of case studies. And today I would like to use some of those case studies just to show you how it works and what we can do and why it is different. So first, we're going to talk about the skills and mindset needed to future-proof our organization. Then, what are the three obstacles that can get in the way? What are the two invisible forces that make or break a team? What's the immune system of a team and how can it get stronger? How can we compete with AI? And a big promise at the end, the secret of happy life. The answer is going to be data-driven, I promise. Any questions or concerns before we carry on? No, that's full trust.
Csaba, hi, this is Manuel.
Hi.
Maybe why in this cadence?
I would say because it's logical to me, but it might not be to other ones. So it's a really good question. So I'm curious how you see it. Because in the beginning, so the idea behind it is that first we have to understand what the problem is. Because if that is not clear, then the solution is not valuable. And that's exactly the challenge that we face as coaches and consultants. Because often people think that they have the solution, they are doing the right thing. So why would they need us? So first we have to build that awareness that it's actually might not be working.
Okay.
That's why.
Thanks a lot.
So what we should be teaching leaders now to prepare for the future? Pretty good question. This is what Jacob Morgan asked 140 top CEOs and 14,000 employees. Got back the answers and published the future leader. And he came up with 4 mindsets and 5 skills. I changed the names a little bit based on his definition because Jedi and things like that didn't make a lot of sense. So in terms of mindset, growth mindset, teamwork, inclusion, and global mindset. In terms of the skills, coaching, innovation, communication, and self-awareness. The last one, technology. As you can see, 8 out of the 9 skills and mindsets are directly linked to how much you understand yourself and others. It's all about people skills. It is that important. It's not optional. It's not soft. That's how you can future-proof your company. So if I know that people skills are so important, a logical question, which is the best solution? You Google it, you get more than 3 billion answers within less than a second. You click on any of them and they claim that they are the best thing in the world. You see a lot of logos and everything. How can you choose? You see the results. That's the problem with that. So there is demand. There is a solution, but do they work? Not necessarily. And I'll tell you why. Because once you have a framework for something, you have a label, it's much easier to identify it. So based on our research, there are 3 things can get in the way. And we call them the dark triad of future risking solutions. Because you're spending money on risking your solution while thinking that you're doing the right thing. And I'll show you the details. The first one is outdated and disconnected solutions. They optimize something that shouldn't exist anymore. Because most of the leadership and management models that we are using today were created by people who were born just after the American Civil War in the 19th century. They were designed for the challenges of the 50s and 60s, when less than 17% of the value was created by humans, and today it's more than 90%. It's almost like trying to fix a smart TV with tools designed for black and white ones. It's a whole new world, and new challenges require new solutions. We can see that. And the other problem is that, especially in big companies, they use so many different frameworks and models that they speak different languages. So how's that going to be meaningful if you don't understand each other? They all measure different things, different metaphors, different colors, instead of creating one operating system and many applications. Otherwise, we don't get each other. The second member of the triad is guess and hope-based solutions. How do you optimize something that you cannot see? Now, if you click on any of those results and you ask them, are your programs useful or entertaining? They would say, off the chart, both of them. You can't get anything better than that. Then you check reality and you realize that is not true. They are barely useful and they are kind of entertaining. This is what the MIT Sloan Management Review found out. They wanted to understand why most leadership programs return negative ROI. They're costing the company. And one of the main reasons was that they don't measure the impact on the people who matter the most. Often they just choose a program based on the packaging. And this is really important. How many leaders get inclusive behavior training? And they think they're doing the right thing, and maybe they do, but if your team members don't feel included, then you are not inclusive. It's that simple. So without measuring the impact, how do you know that you created inclusion? That's the question. And according to that research, there's a problem. But the third member is feels good, but makes no different solutions. So these are the programs that we attend, and then we just love it. Did it make a difference? That's a different question. Growth mindset is one of those things. You attend a course, you read something about it, and then you just feel energized. But according to Carol Dweck, who coined the term, you can have off-the-chart growth mindset, but if your environment is toxic, it's not nurturing, it's not psychologically safe, it means nothing. It has zero benefits because you are going to drown in a toxic environment. And this is what we noticed when we talk to recruiters, that they want the perfect match, but that would imply that you understand both of the sides. And usually that just means that they profile the candidates until they collapse. But there's no information about the team where they're going to join. So it's not a perfect match. So let's look into the 2 invisible forces that make or break a team. But before that, you might have to leave the room. So do you qualify for this workshop? You think it's a joke? Hold on. You've lived at least in 7 countries. That's the first criteria. You have at least a master's degree. So far, everybody's still here? You earn over 250,000. Looks like we're an elite team, no? You're single with no kids.
For now.
So who has to leave? What happened here? How was the feeling inside when you were reading this? What did you feel? Awkward. But the feeling that we felt inside is an attack on our psychological safety, which is horrible. And it's interesting that the concept itself is nothing new. So in 1788, they introduced the Chimney Sweeper Act in the UK because they realized that the minimum age to become a chimney sweeper apprentice was 4 years old. Can you imagine that? 4 years old, go up on the roof and clean the chimney. And people were outraged and they thought, no, this is not right because the employer should have a duty of care. And it took 250 years and bam, suddenly you have the same health and safety standards, at least officially in most countries. But recently they added another category, psychosocial. And the reason is that an attack on your psychological safety can cause more harm than a slap in the face. But because it's invisible, it's difficult to prove it, it's difficult to optimize it. And people get away with it. But now finally they understand it is serious. But at the same time, it is also the #1 trait of high-performing teams. It's proven beyond doubt by Google or even Amy Edmondson. When they wanted to understand what is the secret of high-performing teams, the first idea was, we don't need leaders. Come on, we're cool. It turned out that that was a really bad idea. You need leaders, but good ones. And psychological safety is the #1 trait of high-performing teams. So a very simple question when you talk to a client, where is your team? How do they score on psychological safety? How do you know? I can tell you that 99.9% of the leaders cannot answer that question. But knowing that answer directly relates to how much money they make, how much growth they have. Where was your team before you invested in the program? And where were they after that? No idea. But you have the paper that people enjoy the workshop. Fantastic. Was that valuable or entertaining? It's not the same thing. But psychological safety on its own is not enough. You also need motivation because a business is not a family. You don't put your kids on furlough. You don't sack them if you don't have money. That's not nice. A business is a high-performing team. It has to be safe, but people need to step up. They have to be motivated. But at the same time, how do you motivate people? Daniel Pink has a really interesting research on it. He talks about the evolution of motivation. 1.0 is very primal. Make babies and survive. That's enough. And then that was enough for a while, and we had to upgrade it. Motivation 2.0 is extrinsic. This is the pain and pleasure principle. The carrot and the stick, which is great, but we get used to everything. That's the problem. So you have to punish and reward people more and more to get the same results. But also what the data shows is that when it comes to creativity, strategy, it doesn't work. Indeed, it backfires. You cannot punish or reward people into creativity or teamwork. That happens on level 3. When you tap into the intrinsic motivators. These are the ones that are coming from inside. When you do something for the sake of the process because you enjoy it, because it means a lot to you. But for that, you have to understand people. You have to get to know them. And how do you do that? Like Chris Voss said, the FBI negotiator, there's no such thing as logical, only what matters to someone. And once you understand what that is, you can create that motivating environment around them. I'm going to show you how we can do that. So based on these two invisible forces, how do you know where your team is? That's a very simple question. Are they in the growth zone when they score high on psychological safety and motivation? Are they in the apathy zone when they are lacking both? Are they too comfortable when they have safety but no drive? Or in the anxiety zone, they can still make money, but they are burning out and people are leaving. And there is some kind of motivation, but there's no safety. Where is your team? As a leader, it will be absolutely fundamental to know the answer to this question because it directly relates to how much money you're making. This is one of our case studies. So that was the team. This is a global leadership team of a Fortune 500 company. As a team average, they are already in the apathy zone. But you can see that it's very polarized, which means that within the same environment, under the same leadership, people feel vastly differently. Why? To be honest, I have no idea. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what their problem is at all. But 3 months later, they were here. We put them there. So that's a case study by our partners in the US. Because how can we offer a solution without diagnosis? That's the question. This is just data, but the insights come from the people. So the stories without data are just noise, but data without stories are powerless. But when you combine both, that's when magic happens. That's exactly what they did. At the same time, we have no idea what the issues are, but we know where the issues are and we know how serious they are. So that's the reason why we follow a 4-step process. First, you measure it, then you visualize it, optimize it, and then we grow. Step 2, when you visualize it, means that we discuss it with the team. We create meaningful conversations because we have no idea what's going on. They do, but maybe they don't have the vocabulary. They don't have the framework to talk about these things. So after 3 months, psychological safety went up by 30% and motivation by 25%. That is the level of transparency that we can provide. You diagnose it first, you measure the progress, and based on the result, we can adjust the approach. That's the goal. This is what I mean by data-driven leadership and team development. When it comes to the future and people, guessing is not an option because we can see the results that those solutions are delivering. So we have to raise the standards. Before you practice, I've got still a test for you because I know you like tests. What can you see on the picture? How about this one? What if I tell you that on the second picture, there's a really good looking cow staring at you?
Oh, there's the cow. Okay, I see the cow now.
Why do you think that we did this? One thing is that if something doesn't make sense for the first time, try to look at it from a different perspective. And then maybe it's easier. Because we are all looked into different behavior patterns. So when something doesn't work, then we just try it harder. That is human nature. When people don't understand us in a foreign language, then we start shouting because that's going to help. No, we have to try it differently. But at the same time, this is your number one priority as a leader. That you have to make sure that everybody can see the cow. Because like you said, once you can see the cow, it cannot be unseen. You can see it everywhere. And that is the most difficult part because often we think that we have the same vision and then we realize that is not true. Inc. magazine had a really interesting research. They asked all the employees about the top 3 priorities of the company. So there was nothing abstract like, values and beliefs and, fluffy stuff. No, top 3 priorities of the company that's paying your salary. They expected 64% of the people to know the answer. What was the percentage of the people who knew the answer? What do you think? Maya, 5%. Yes, so negative, but still too optimistic because actually it was 2%. 2% of the employees. They have no idea what they want to achieve. They know they have to make more money. They know they have to spend less, but why they do it, you don't know. How can you be motivated? How can you be driven if you have no idea what you want to achieve? Even just a good idea could change everything, but no, people have no idea. We are lacking it. And that's why cow is absolutely important. So this is what we do, and I need your assistance now. Because when people take the assessments, we have the data only, but people have the insight. So with this, we can create meaningful conversations. So this is from the same case study. one question within inclusivity. People on this team sometimes reject others for being different. The average is 53%, and the attention score is 56%, which means that you have replies within this range. So as you can see, some people feel like fish in the water and others feel rejected. Why? I don't know. But then another topic within motivation, the purpose. Members of this team are competent and motivated to continuously level up. 47%, that is below 50. That's definitely not good. And the attention score is 63%. How is that possible? So here's my question. And technically, we have 2 breakout rooms. And if you can discuss it among yourself, maybe in 7.5 minutes, what are the questions that you would use to uncover the real reasons? So we can adjust the root causes rather than assuming the problems and addressing the symptoms. So this is step 2 that we do when we display the results topic by topic, biomarker by biomarker. What would you ask as a coach? So imagine that you are the coach now and you have your team in front of you and you're discussing the result. What would you ask? Because we want the root cause. So we can address that and we can co-create the next steps. Let's investigate. We display the data and then we try to find out why within the same environment people feel so differently. So what are the questions that you would ask as a coach or trainer to find the answer?
I would ask them to help me make sense of this.
Yes.
I would ask, what can we do to make sure no one feels rejected?
Mhm.
Because maybe then learn some behaviors or patterns in our team, which can make team members feeling this rejection.
Mhm. Yeah, so we would ask for examples.
I would try to be specific to understand what behaviors can make someone feel like that.
Mhm.
But being different is for me very broad. Yes, so it can be different thinking, different. And it's actually, the question is actually 2, because one part of the question is the feeling of being rejected, but we don't know why. Second part, so basically someone can feel rejected, but not for being different, but maybe for being rude, or I don't know.
Okay. And now we're getting closer. That's exactly the point. That depending on how you understand the question also, you see the word very differently. Because the question is, for example, what do you mean by rejection? Because sometimes, you can criticize a task and people take it personally and they feel rejected personally. Or what do you mean by different? What is your definition of different? Can we bring up an example when somebody was rejected? So we can analyze that. And this is when people realize that it is really, really subjective, because the same behavior can be seen as positive or negative depending on how you interpret it. And that's also the key when we work with people. That often when we talk about inclusion and psychological safety and all those things, then we focus on the external environment, completely ignoring the other 50%, the fact that your sense of belonging and inclusion and safety depends on you, how you interpret the situation. So instead of shaming the company into inclusion, maybe we realize that some people, individuals, need more support because maybe they had really bad experience in a previous job. That's an option as well, and it happened. When it comes to question 13, what would you ask? How would you dig deeper?
Okay, here basically 2 questions in one question, because I can have a very highly competent team, which is just bored, and they are not motivated to continuously level up. Or I have, like talking about Blanchard levels, yes, of the situational leadership, yes. So I can have people who are in different stages of their career. Yes, I can have the beginners, and they can have extreme high motivation, but they don't know how to do things, how to do things. Again, two aspects in one question for me. And it could be easily answered for me with the Blanchard situational leadership tool, just to understand on which stage the employees. And if we are talking about organizations.
So I can tell you based on the experience that, when we do this with teams, then often the issue is that, first of all, they don't know how to evaluate if somebody is competent or not, because they can see behaviors, but not intentions. So, for example, if I go to work and I look laid back, then you might think that I don't care, or maybe I'm not competent, but you don't know that I was up all night working on something. So maybe that's just based on misunderstanding. Then also, can you be motivated to level up? Is it appreciated? Is it valued within the company? Or if you are getting better, it just means that you have to work more for the same amount of money, so it's not worth it. That's an option as well. So it's really interesting to see that during these conversations, there are so many different options. There are so many different reasons why people feel less safe and less motivated. But somehow they just don't talk about it. So when we do this debrief, that's when we find out what the root causes are, so we can co-create the next steps. Because until then, we are just guessing. And we are under the impression that we can see everything clearly. But when you hear the questions from other people, that's when we realize that, no, actually, they see the world very differently. And a lot of problems are due to misunderstanding, because we see other people's behavior, but not their intention. And then once we do this, then it's almost like a dashboard. We can see where they have a lot of tension, which biomarkers we have to focus on. So we cannot adjust everything immediately, but we focus on the most impactful ones. That's what I mean by addressing the root causes. That's how they can get exponential impact. It's almost like, when you take an MRI, that you can see that something is wrong, but you don't know what it is, but that's where you have to dig deeper. So that's exactly what we can do with team dynamics. Because if something is invisible, then you have this gut feeling that something is wrong, or I'm frustrated, but I don't know how to translate it into tangible and visible and applicable insights. And that's exactly what we have to do. Because psychological safety and belonging, inclusion are fundamental needs needed. Diversity is great if we can unlock the potential. But we also have to strengthen the immune system of the team. And before we do that, I need to ask you a question. How many elephants are there? So imagine that you're standing in front of it. You can see the two giraffes. I'm standing next to it, and it's a good-looking elephant. Clearly, we have a disagreement. And if you know that you are right, then the default option is that I'm wrong. And then, of course, you have to convince me that you are smart and I'm not. You win and I lose. That's what we do usually. That's the default option. And then, of course, we have to convince ourselves as well. So we have to surround ourselves with people who agree with us. So yeah, look at that. Csaba knows nothing. He doesn't even know what elephant is. So everybody confirms that, yes, that's the giraffe. And this is called homophilic diversity. One of the strongest forces in team dynamics, that we like and trust people who are similar to us, people who think like us, people who have common sense. One of the strongest forces. And it's a fantastic feeling because, we can all agree that the earth is flat. It doesn't make it flat. But why would I talk to someone who disagrees with me? I don't need that hassle in my life. And social media algorithms work exactly like that. This is cognitive diversity, when you have very different perspectives and you can see the same situation from different perspectives, but that is just the potential. Can you make it work? Or that's going to be a fight. What if we compromise and we meet in the middle? Then it's just a mess. Can't see anything. Sometimes we have to go to the other side to see the same situation from a completely different perspective, and then it makes sense. And that is the key message here. And I'll show you why this is important. Because often we rely on common sense and good intention to manage and lead people and serve them, but it creates a mindset gap. Because we think that treating people the way we want to be treated is fantastic. From an ethical perspective, yes. But when it comes to leadership, no, it can backfire. And here's the reason. For example, 86% of leaders think that they are absolutely outstanding, they're inspirational. But according to Gallup, 82% of employees think they're not. How come there's such a big gap? That's exactly our topic as well, that often we have the good intention and we want to interact with people, but somehow it backfires. But often we don't even know why exactly, or we don't know that it did. Because if you look at, for example, this one, 93% of leaders think they're excellent communicators. Now you can see what's on the other side. 91% of employees think that they're lacking basic communication skills. Again, there's a huge mindset gap that can create a lot of issues. According to Salesforce, for example, they have the data about sales. 80% of CEOs believe that they have excellent customer service. Obviously, it's based on their own preferences. But according to Salesforce, only 8% of customers agree with them. 8. That's not a lot. So often the feedback is in the silence. Because according to them, 91% of people are not going to say anything. They just go somewhere else where they feel valued and understood. But they are bleeding money. National differences. So when it comes to cultural intelligence, what's your definition? I'm curious. What is cultural intelligence? And people have different definitions. But what you refer to, the invisible layer, that's exactly cognitive diversity, the way people see the world, the way they process information. And technically, that is the only layer of diversity that has proven benefit in terms of performance. And I can show you case studies like that. The way people think. So when it comes to making sense of the world, what is more important, your personality or culture? It's like the chicken or egg dilemma. That's the right answer, because we need both. You cannot separate them. So technically, when it comes to understanding people and how they make sense of the world, there are two main approaches. One is the intercultural solutions, explaining what is normal and expected in a country. And this is what most people think, that it's cultural intelligence. But there are a few challenges with that. One is that more than 80% of cultural differences exist within countries, not between them, which is also good news, because that means we have more experience than we realize. We all belong to 15 or 20 culture groups at the same time. That's why I ask you those questions about cultural differences. That's the age, gender, educational level, religion, a lot of different hobbies, a lot of different things. We all belong to 15 or 20 cultural groups. And just think about it. If you talk to someone, even within your own family, what are the chances that they belong to the same 15 or 20 cultural groups like you? It's pretty much zero. That means that every single conversation is a cross-cultural dialogue, and every single team is multicultural, even if it's not international. And according to studies, the poorest container of culture is country of origin, gender, and generation. Meaning that based on these categories, you cannot predict an individual's values and beliefs. That has nothing to do with science. So culture is a group behavior that most people conform to. It doesn't mean that most people share any of those values. It just means that we conform to certain norms because we want to belong, pretty much. And that is the key. So the international approach is important for global mobility. For example, because if I move to a new country, it makes a lot of sense to learn about what is normal and expected. But if my success depends on how well I understand individuals, it can truly backfire. Because as the research shows, that would be wrong 88 to 98% of the time. So when it comes to norms, it's great. But when it comes to individuals, no, it's not. So the other approach to understanding people is psychometric models. And sometimes people get really fanatic about it and they choose a partner based on that and all those things. But there you have different versions. But here's an example. Imagine that you profile this beautiful sunflower and you know everything about this flower. You profiled it. But where are you going to stick it? In the snow? In the middle of the desert? In the middle of the jungle? Or in the right place? Depending on where you put it, you're going to have a very different outcome. And that's exactly what Carol Dweck said as well. You can be amazing, but your environment needs to be supporting and nurturing. And the reason is that your personality determines how you want to behave, but your environment determines how you have to behave. And that is the key. You cannot separate it. More than 10 years ago, I heard it from many people when they said that, oh, you cannot compare personality and culture. I said, yes, you can. And the problem is that we label them differently. So if you think about a clashing with somebody in your own family, you might label it as personal differences. If the exact same situation happens to you with somebody from a different country, you might label it as cultural differences. But beneath the surface, on the cognitive level, it was exactly the same thing. We just labeled them differently, so we had this illusion of separation. But as soon as you talk about individual and group mindset, you can see that they are compatible. You cannot even separate them. And this is the second approach that we are using, because Global Disc removes that illusion of separation. It's a full integrated system, which means that you use the same framework and vocabulary across all personalities and cultures. And that makes it much more uncomplicated and practical because we cannot separate them. We don't exist in isolation. So once you take the assessment, you can learn about the 3 layers of your identity: what you do, how, and also why. And that's important because 95% of our actions are driven by values and beliefs we are not even aware of. But this is not the end. This is the starting point, because often people use psychometric assessments as an excuse that I'm red, you blue, and then we manage to widen the gap instead of building a common ground. So once you know that, we can measure the mindset gap between you and your environment. That's the difference between what's natural to you and what is normal around you. If you are brave enough, you can measure the mindset gap between 2 people and even your partner at home. The underlying concept is the same. Talk about something we are not aware of. But we can also measure the gap between the leader and the team. And that often explains why they really try to motivate people, but somehow it backfires. We're not building on stereotypes. When it comes to people, we want to deal with facts. So they can choose the best leadership style, and they know how to motivate them. This is another case study that was a few years ago. So everybody, all the participants, were very similar in terms of profession, and they all grew up in Jakarta. As you can see, they were not really statistically average. But all of them had to learn how to conform to the norms, how to be normal. And that's exactly my point. That wherever you go, you find the same type of people. The question is what they have to conform to and how much they can be themselves. And that's a big difference. But the key is this, and then we can practice. People, what they consider right based on what they consider true to get the best outcome. We do our best based on what we know. But when it comes to your behavior, it's driven by a few things. Once, your personality, what you consider right and true. You can call them values and beliefs. That's why I said it's not what is right and what is true, but what we consider right and true, and what our environment considers normal. And I made it bigger because we usually conform to the norms. If I go to, let's say, a temple in Asia and everybody stands up, I am going to stand up, definitely, because I don't want to look silly. Do I know why? No. But I will conform to the norms. And this is what we do when we get a new job or go anywhere. If you don't know what to do, we just look around and then we try to copy the behavior. So here's an example. There are people who believe that this is 100% true, that the plants are the foundation of health, strength, and vitality. If this is what they would consider true, next 3 months, we are willing to take risk. Indeed, we find it exciting. On the other side, it's the exact opposite. Hold on a second. We have to think long term. Everything has to be reliable and precise. And we try to play it safe. We want to eliminate everything. So you can imagine how they clash. So this is an actual team. That's the average. And this is the range. So you have all the participants. Sometimes we also add the country norms to it, just to see what is normal in certain environments. So imagine that you have a situation. Let's start another project. We can work out the details later on. How would you see it from this side? How would you feel? What would you understand if you are on a result-oriented side?
It's a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah. And the other side, how would you feel?
Hold on a second. What do you mean start?
Yeah, we need more details. So you see exactly the same situation, the same team, but depending on their preferences, they feel very differently. Some feel excited, motivated. The other side feels demotivated and scared and not safe at all. So that's why cognitive diversity is so important to understand team dynamics, because your preferences determine how you perceive the world and how safe and motivated you feel. Carpe diem, seize the day. Result-oriented, how do you feel about this? Yeah. So carpe diem is something that result-oriented people would tattoo on their bum because, this is our principle and, we have to enjoy life. But on the other side, hold on a second. And this is really interesting because especially this dimension can cause a lot of friction in a team. But at the end of the day, you need all of them, but maybe in different stages. You need result-oriented because they are willing to take risks. They have that drive, but they are not the ones who are going to finish something. But the other side, they can create a structure, as you said. They can spot mistakes that you would never ever notice. So if you can combine both, then you create a high-performing team. But if you cannot unite them in a goal, in a mission, then why would they hang out? They just don't want to because it feels wrong. Because one side you would look at the result-oriented side as, come on, you're endangering me. Why are you so reckless? And then you would look at the process-oriented. No, come on, you put me in danger. You're slowing me down, taking opportunities away. So in a team, we need both, but we just have to understand the bigger the mindset gap is, the bigger the potential is for clashing or synergy, depending on your level of people skills, how you can make them work, depending on the level of safety. This is another case study. Big German company, they employed a lot of Brazilian engineers, and we had to create a high-performing team. We started with the typical German and Brazilian approach. Obviously, there's a big gap. But when they completed the assessment, it turned out that the Brazilian engineers were much more German inside than most Germans. And for them, it was like a psychological permission that, wow, this is the right environment. Yes, they have to learn how to buy a bus ticket, but on a cognitive level, it was the right environment. So instead of highlighting non-existent differences, we built a common ground. And they succeeded. So we can measure these things because you can see, for example, that you have medium cognitive diversity in the team. So imagine that you have a situation here, a problem or opportunity, and you have people around, 60%. You have a big blind spot. Can you make the best decision? It depends. But this is just the potential. Because what if people don't feel safe and motivated? The people cannot or don't want to speak up, then you lose the power of diversity. And that's how you can risk the future of the company. So all that potential is there, but it's not unlocked because it's not the right environment. So it's not automatic. This was a update on LinkedIn that went viral. We had more than 1 million views and a lot of people shared it because often they just jump to the conclusion, oh, this quiet people, yeah, those are the introverts. Don't write them off. That's not necessarily true. There can be very different reasons why people don't want to or willing to speak up. But we don't want to guess about this. So this is the question. Based on the 3 invisible forces, where is your team? And I can tell you that most leaders cannot answer that question. Where is your team? Are they in the growth zone when they score high on all three forces? Are they in stage 2, which is the time bomb, when you have an issue with one of the forces? If you find the time bomb, you can diffuse it. If you cannot, then there's a problem. Is it decline? 2 problems? Or game over, stage 4, when you have issues with all 3 of them? How can you make an informed decision if you don't have the information? And I can tell you that sometimes the data-driven approach can be empowering or scary, depending on someone's self-esteem. It's like, I can step on the scale and the number is too high. I can say it's a fake news and, I'm offended, or I can get on a diet. It's information. How we use it is important. So when it comes to AI, it's really interesting. And you can see that only 1 out of the 9 skills and mindsets are related to technology. AI is not the solution. Artificial intelligence is more alien intelligence, according to Yuval Noah Harari. It doesn't think like us. It's not just an upgraded version of us, but they think very differently. And I can tell you why. Have you ever played Go, this game?
No, I know that AI won already, yes.
Oh yeah, AI can win anything. So Go is something that's been played for 2,500 years, especially in Asia. Whole philosophies, business models were built around it. There's nothing to explore until AlphaGo arrived. Within days, it managed to beat the champion, the human champion, and it made us realize that we discovered only a tiny fraction of the possibilities hidden within Go. Tiny. And it was such a breakthrough because the same level of thinking and issue can appear in finance, education, everywhere. It doesn't think like us. But then what is the solution? Because if you look at the different levels, you can have a pre-programmed one, make me a coffee, you get a coffee, fantastic. It's not AI, but it feels good. Level 2, oof, Lina, you look tired. Do you want a coffee? No, it's a bit scary because they are suggesting something. But when they invent something for you, that's the next level. But the most important part is this, that we think that empathy is our superpower. But ChatGPT managed to make us realize that it's not, because it won 24 out of 26 topics when it was competing against human doctors. AI was more empathetic, more caring, and more accurate than humans. So we just have to understand what we have to focus on, because if there is a job where you have to process information, then that is gone. But when you have to combine social skills, motor skills, that's easier. The reason is that, for example, an AI could write a prescription for you, but the AI is not going to change the bandage on a crying 5-year-old girl when the parents are just standing around them. You still need human touch. So what we need to understand, how technology can complement us and what we can double down on instead of competing. Because this was the other post that went viral on LinkedIn, that sometimes the problem is crystal clear. Even the solution is obvious. But then you have people, and it just gets messy. And sometimes it's very difficult. That's the challenge with that. How can we turn differences into synergy? That is the question. Do you know the infinite monkey theorem? Have you heard about this? It's a weird one, but it makes sense. So technically what it means is that if you give enough time to something, then it might happen. Because, if you have unlimited options, then even the monkeys could type up William Shakespeare's work. So that's fantastic, but in reality, in 2004, they tried it. And the monkeys were really interesting. So they were bashing the letter S for some reason. That was the most popular one. And one of them started urinating on the computers. So it didn't last long. So there was no Shakespeare, there was nothing. But my point is that everything is possible. But you stand a much better chance if you have a proven data-driven blueprint. You get much better results. That's my point. Even then, it's not easy. And in the beginning, I asked you, and you got really evil, how would you ruin the world? And ChatGPT said this, and you were on the right track. Suppress psychological safety, so people become disengaged. Micromanage them, so people lose motivation. Have your favorite ones, so collaboration breaks down. Undermine growth and development, you mentioned it. Bad communication and short-term thinking. So the interesting thing is that this is how AI would destroy an organization. But these are exactly the same behaviors that we noticed when we scanned hundreds of different teams. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if a leader is incompetent or evil. If they display these behaviors, the outcome is the same. They are risking the future of the organization. And often the best way of saving it is by not ruining it, which is also good news. But often they are not aware of it. So as a last thing, the secret. What is the secret? Do you know what the secret is? Any guesses?
Hello.
Oh, I mean, it's not far off, but to be honest, Robert Wadinger, the Harvard professor, was researching it. So it is an 80-year-long experiment, 80-year-old. And they followed 25 people. And they had interviews and body scans and all those things every 2 years. And technically, the result was after 80 years that the secret to happy life is the quality of relationships with others and ourselves. So love is a shorter version of that, but this is how important that is, to have meaningful relationships. But that one starts with us. And sometimes that is the first obstacle, because if I don't like myself, it's very difficult to like other people. So as a thank you, if you are interested, I would love to send you a digital copy of The Uncommon Sense in Unusual Times. It's a hybrid book. So it's not just a good looking book, but you can also request a course. So you can read a chapter and then also you can experience it. And it also includes an assessment and a certificate and a lot of other things, which I would love to share with you if you need it. I can put my email address in the chat and just refer to the meeting. And I can send it to you. So there's no cheeky upsell or anything. It's just a thank you for attending the event.